What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk or subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. And as we've been saying for the last week, 2 weeks, make sure to go check out our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Clips in the pinned comment under this video to enter to win a Mean Joe Green jersey, bunch of other giveaways, and also check out more All Steelers Talk because that's where the videos are going. I'm down here in Orlando at the 2024 owners meetings. It's been a very wild day. As you could tell, I'm a little sweaty. Wind, heat is not what it's like in Pittsburgh. Hope you're doing all right in the cold. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling good. I'm a little, quite honestly, when you were complaining about how hot it was down there, I looked outside, I looked at the temperature, and I was a little mad at you for a second. I would gladly trade places, but I hope you're enjoying it down there. I hope it gets a little easier on you, and I hope it's not as hot the rest of the weekend while you're down there.
No. I hope it's just as hot. I 100% hear what you're saying. I should not be complaining about how hot it is. I get it, 100%. I can't complain about how hot it is. It's beautiful down here in Orlando, especially leaving. I left yesterday, left in a sweatshirt, got here middle of the night, and I was like, wow, it's like 75 degrees outside. This is unbelievable. So I can't complain. My apologies. For those of you who haven't been paying attention to the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are working down here. Omar Khan, Art Rooney, Mike Tomlin, going through all the rule changes. They're going to meet as they normally do. The competition committee, the owners, just kind of decide on all the changes of the NFL. Meanwhile, us local reporters get some insight on Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, where the team is currently, where they're headed next. It's the first time we talked to Mike Tomlin in 2 months since then. They have had a complete overhaul of the quarterback room. They have traded Deontay Johnson. They have made all of their offseason signings. They have prepared for the NFL draft, went through the NFL combine, and there is more to come. So it was awesome to get some insight there, and we'll get more over the next 2 days. Tomlin talked to us today, and obviously Russell Wilson and Justin Fields were the big topics of conversation. Who's going to start? Where are you going to go from here? Why did you acquire Justin Fields so quickly? What happened with Kenny Pickett? And, well, what makes Russell Wilson so great? Tomlin addressed it all. The big one, obviously, is that he confirmed for right now, Russell Wilson is QB1 of the Pittsburgh Steelers, saying, quote, "We've been very transparent about the pecking order, at least to start. I think that provides clarity for all parties involved. Russell is a veteran. He's got a proven process of readiness. He's been in this league a long time. He's capable of rallying troops, receivers, tight ends, running backs, etc. He's just got a lot of experience in terms of what it takes to be the guy over the course of a 12-month calendar. And I just think that's something that a younger guy like Justin can learn from. It provides clarity for all parties involved as they do some of their informal things that collectives do at this time of the year." He had nothing but praise for Russell Wilson, said that he certainly, quote unquote, certainly still has plenty left in the tank. But then he went on to talk a little bit about Justin Fields and what Justin Fields could bring to the team. And he said, quite honestly, I don't really know what is going to come with Justin Fields yet because he hasn't gotten an idea to see what Justin Fields can bring to an NFL team outside of the Chicago Bears. But he continued his quote by saying, quote, "Rest assured, when it comes time to compete, Justin will be given an opportunity to compete and will allow those guys to sort themselves out. But I thought it was appropriate to describe it in a way that I described it as we get started. Russell's in pole position. I think his body of work justifies that. And just from my conversations with Justin, I know he's excited about working alongside Russell and maybe learning some of those veteran tricks of the trade and veteran things that he's picked up from being in this league for over a decade." First off, absolutely love, just because it's weird, that he calls Russell Wilson Russell and Justin Fields Justin, because just something about Russell just gets me every time it came out of his mouth. I kind of chuckled a little bit. I was like, Russell. I don't know why. It's weird. Your thoughts when you hear all that? Mike Tomlin declaring Russell Wilson the starter, but then also saying, in his words, Justin Fields will get his chance to compete when that time comes. What were your thoughts there?
That it made sense. I think the kind of the operative, the thing that I really hung on to from that quote was Mike Tomlin saying his body of work justifies it. I think that's a pretty succinct way to put it. Russell Wilson has been there and done that. He is older, but he has been successful in his time in the league. I understand there are some concerns about whether or not he can be the guy that he was, especially in Seattle, versus, is he going to be the guy that you saw for his 2 years in Denver? But Wilson has a lot more to grab onto from earlier in his career than Justin Fields does. It's pretty much just that simple. But I also think that he wasn't very shy about saying that Fields will have his chance. And I don't think Fields should be ruled out at all. Maybe not necessarily as a week one starter. I think that's a real long shot, but I think he will certainly get an opportunity to prove that he can play. I think if I was a betting man, I'd say at some point he does get that opportunity to start for one reason or another. But it also just made me think that they look at Justin Fields as kind of a longer term solution. I think Mike Tomlin has a longer view of this quarterback room than he might let on right now. I believe he said he doesn't think past this year, especially as it relates to the quarterbacks. But I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't look a little bit longer, especially when you have a guy like Justin Fields who's still pretty young, especially for a guy who spent, 3 years, 4 years it's 3 years, I believe.
3 years in the NFL. This is year 4.
Yeah. So he's still got a long road ahead of him. And he's obviously a talented guy that has proven that he can make some dynamic plays. I think it's impossible to flip on the film with Justin Fields and not see all that potential and not say, yeah, we gotta see at least what we have here. I don't think you can bury him on the depth chart. It's certainly not going to be a Chris Oladokun situation where this guy just doesn't take any reps at all. Like they're going to want to see what he has, especially with those first team. I think with those first team starters, like Justin's going to take first team reps. I feel like in training camp, he's not going to be completely shut out of that.
No, I agree. I think at some point he does, like, I don't know how much of a competition it's going to be, but I do think at some point it's Justin Fields gets some reps to see what he is capable of. I 100% agree with that. Here's what I want to talk about next. Size matters. We all know it, and it's important to remember it in times of need. I recently went to a small law firm in hopes of getting the compensation I felt I deserved. I didn't, and to this day, I still think about the money that I may have missed out on. I filled out mounds of paperwork, then waited around for what felt like forever, got phone call after phone call telling me what I did not do right in the process, and it was expensive. All to get underwhelming compensation and almost zero satisfaction. Fortunately, if you ever get seriously injured and want to file a claim, you don't have to go through the same hassle I did. Instead, you can make it way easier by finding out if you have a claim in just a few clicks on your phone and working with America's biggest injury law firm with the promise of being for the people. Here comes Morgan & Morgan, today's sponsor. Morgan & Morgan has over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states fighting to get their clients the money they deserve. In recent months, they've achieved verdicts for their clients, including one that is worth $26 million. That is 40 times the highest insurance offer. And they're absolutely free unless you win. I got lowballed. Don't make the same mistake I did. Fighting big companies takes a big firm, and with America's biggest injury law firm, you're ready to take on insurance companies of any size. Don't overthink it. You can start your claim in just a few clicks by following the link in our description or by going to www.forthepeople.com/allsteelers. It only takes a few minutes to find out if you have a case, and if you have, it might be worth millions. Tomlin's word saying, and you brought this up, I don't look past last year. Once he said that, I don't know, things kind of changed for me. I looked at it and I was like, okay, if you don't look past this year, why are you saying that Justin Fields gets an opportunity to compete when that time comes? Like, does that just mean that time will come in training camp and he'll just get an opportunity in training camp to compete with Russell Wilson? Does that mean that, I don't know, like at some point, if Russell Wilson just doesn't work out, then you get an opportunity to compete? Is he kind of saying like he doesn't have 100% faith in Russell Wilson? And I don't think that was the message. I think that it was more so that to some capacity, Justin Fields will have some sort of opportunity in Pittsburgh this season, or at least this summer. The question really is like, what's that capacity? Like, is it, do you go into training camp and you just say like Justin Fields gets for every 4 reps Russ gets, Justin gets 1? Do they switch every practice like it was a couple of years ago? Is it like the Kenny's rookie year where it's Mitch's job, but Kenny is kind of like prepping to be that guy that steps in? I don't know. How do you look at it? Do you look at it as, it'll be every other rep? Do you look at it as it'll be every other day? Do you look at it as it'll be a mix? Like, I don't know. I think that's my big question.
I don't think it'll be. I think it'll be very far from an even split. I think it'll be closer to that kind of 4-to-1 ratio that you mentioned. I
Yeah.
think at the end of the day, they're looking at it as we've got to get Russ ready for week 1. I
Yeah.
think that's the bottom line, is that they are saying it's. I'll put it this way: Russ is not. This isn't an open competition. It's not. Who's going to be our starter week 1. It's Russ is our starter. We are going to roll into week 1 with him as long as he's healthy.
Yeah.
We need to be ready for the possibility that Russ either, doesn't play up to our standards or gets hurt. And Justin needs to have some kind of background in the offense and with the first teamers in order to be ready for that opportunity. But I think they are 100% walking into training camp, walking into this offseason saying, Russell Wilson is our week 1 starter. I really think Justin Fields would have to do a hell of a lot to break that and to move on from that. He would
Yeah.
really have to be spectacular in limited reps too. But I also think Russell Wilson would also have to be pretty bad, and honestly, to lose this job. Like, I think this is not a very wide open door for Fields to get his foot in there. I think his foot is in there, but it's going to take a lot to unseat Russell Wilson, I think.
So I agree. I think it is going to take a lot to unseat Russell Wilson. And I don't know if it's possible to even have that be a real thing this year. I think what I don't know. I want to say this without trying to like make it a big deal. Like I don't want this to be taken as Noah saying that the door is open for Justin Fields to start, because I just don't think that that's the case. I'm more so looking at it like, I think the Steelers believe Russell Wilson is going to be very good, and they hope Russell Wilson is going to be very good. But they also have an understanding, and Mike Tomlin has an understanding, that Russell Wilson hasn't been very good for the last 3 years, at least not to Russell Wilson's standards. Better than Kenny Pickett's standards, not to Patrick Mahomes' standards. And if that's the Russell that they get in Pittsburgh, if that's the Russ Wilson that they get, is the guy who's going to go 7-8, and at some point you're going to have decisions to make, they don't want to. He wants to declare Russ the starter without making it a definitive, because when you make it a definitive, then it's Russ is the guy, and when Russ starts to stink, it takes a lot more to kind of change that or alter that perspective or make that change at quarterback. And I think that by this, it kind of just allows him to be like, Russ is the guy. He's got a leg up in the competition. He should be the week 1 starter. But if it doesn't work out, we're not going to sit here and say Russ is 100%. I think he understands. Like, I think there's a part of Mike Tomlin who understands that it's a little ridiculous for Russell Wilson to be already named the starter in Pittsburgh. That, like, neither of these guys have taken a single snap in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. Justin Fields is 10 years younger than Russell Wilson. Like, he should clearly be your future. And there are reports coming out about how Russell Wilson is going to sign a long-term deal in Pittsburgh after the season. Like, I think he understands that is hopefully the plan, but it does sound a little crazy that they're already starting to think that far ahead, and make those rash decisions.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about, they want to keep the door open a little bit. They don't want to, because I think when you say something as definitive as Russ is our starter, Russ is our guy, we're rolling with him, Justin's definitely the backup. It gives you less leeway to give Justin the opportunity to get ready, to stay ready. And like you said, it makes it so much harder to remove Russ, because if you don't have faith that Justin can step in, that Justin is a possibility at this point, you don't inspire a ton of confidence when he does have to possibly step in. And I think they are painting a picture where these guys are closer than they maybe are in practice. Like Russell Wilson, the gap they feel is between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields is maybe a little larger than they're letting on at this point, I
Yes.
think, or at least
Yes.
it is in their heads. They imagine the distance between those guys is bigger, but they want to paint as a little smaller so that they can keep their options open.
I agree.
And yeah,
I agree. Do you think what's the leash? What do you think the leash is for Russell Wilson?
I mean, so it's tough because I think they have a sense of urgency. Like we've talked about all offseason, like these guys want to win, need to win. They've expressed the desire that this season is not going to be like other seasons. So to that extent, it's not like, oh, we're waiting until week 6 to make sure that we made the wrong decision.
Yeah.
But I think if you compare it to Mitch Trubisky, he was benched at halftime of week 4, so he got, what is that, seven halves of football to before
Yes.
he
Yes.
7 halves. Wow, we are so good at math.
So good at math.
But I think it's less than that, to be quite honest. Like if the Steelers are, I don't need, I don't know. Like I think if they went 2-1 in their first 2 games, the offense has to look real bad. It has to look stale. It has to be under that kind of 20 points per game margin.
Yeah.
I think the timing is more important than the actual play, if that
Yes.
makes sense to a certain extent. Like if Russ doesn't, it's not like Russ has to be a disaster in 3 games. It's he can't have them. He has them not looking good, through 3 games. Like it's not necessarily that everything has to fall apart, but it's just if it doesn't click quickly, if they don't look real good quickly, I think that's where you're gonna get some antsy people.
I agree. I think that I mean we brought it up. I wish I did not close that tab, but I believe that the number is 158 teams between, I don't know, 1990,
1995 or 1992 or something like that. It was in the 90s,
and
early
and
90s.
and 2022. 100, I believe it's 158 teams have started 0-3. 4 of them have made the playoffs. So I would say week 3 is the mark. I would say if you lose week 1, depending on what your schedule is, like
Right.
if you walk in there and you get easy games, that changes the whole thing. Like if you start your season against whoever, Carolina, or I don't know, I don't have the teams in front of me here, but if you start your season and you're like 0-3 and things are looking really good, but you played absolutely nobody, and then those next 3 games, like there's talk about them starting in Denver. If you don't win in Denver against Jarrett Stidham, you're like, you should be benched immediately. But if you start 3-0 or whatever, and then things look bad because you're playing good competition, I don't think the leash extends depending on how they start the year, depending on who they play. If you're playing the Eagles and the Browns and the Ravens and the Texans or whoever, and you go 4-0, okay, you're allowed to have some downtime. If you start 0-2, 0-3 right off the bat, I think there's a quarterback change. I think that's when it starts. I don't think that it happens in training camp unless like Russ looks really, really bad. But
yeah, he'd have to look really bad in training
really
camp.
bad. Like it's like impossible. Like it's Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph's the only guy. Like he's the only one that we have ever come on this podcast and have said, man, Mason looks really bad at training camp.
Well, and we only were really saying that because we were like, man, this guy doesn't take any risk. Like he's making all this. It's not even like he was throwing 8 picks or whatever in practice. It was because he wasn't, challenging himself at all.
Yep, exactly. So I think it's impossible to look bad in training camp if you are nearly impossible to look bad in training camp if you are a quarterback. So I would say it goes into the regular season. I would say like week 3, if you start 0-3, if you start 0-2, you get a quarterback change. I think the pressure's higher. Like I think if it was Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson won the job, which he would have, then I think Russ's leash would have been a lot longer. But the fact that Russ doesn't have to win a quarterback competition, I think that shortens his leash. Like I think that actually makes it a tighter window that you have to work through once the season starts, because like you didn't earn the trust of the team you were given it, and I think that plays a little bit of a role in it. I would say 0-3, and then if you start 3-0 and then you go 3-4, I would say that opens the door as well. Once you start playing with this season might go downhill fast, there's going to be change, and there's no denying there's going to be change.
Right. And I mean, just think about the context. I mean, the Steelers made it to the playoffs this year. They were, 2 games, I think, removed from maybe only 1 game from the 2 seed. Like the difference in record between them and the
Yeah.
Bills was only 2 games,
Two
if I'm not
games at the end of the year. Yeah.
right. So, I mean, this wasn't a team that was in a disastrous spot in the first place, and this is a team that is now aiming higher than, 7 seed in the playoffs, first round exit. Like that's I
Yep.
think the other thing you got to keep in mind is it's possible to make it back from 0-3 and make it to the playoffs, but this is a team that is aiming much, much, much higher. You cannot recover from 0-3 and get to, you know, 12-5. That is nearly
Yeah.
impossible. You can't get to 13-4. That's what the Steelers are aiming for at this point. Like we've heard the sense of urgency, we've heard the desire to climb above and to be one of the elite teams out there. So I don't think there will be any tolerance for 0-3 for sure. That would sink Russell Wilson. I'm almost certain of it, no matter how confident they are in him right now.
Yeah, 100%. Which leads to the next part of this is Tomlin says he's not looking past 2024. Do you believe him? And do you believe that? I mean, you said at the beginning of this podcast, Justin Fields kind of feels like he's the future. Do you think that they're already thinking that far ahead? And is that like, what does Russ have to do this season to stop that and to make those reports about him extending true? And at the same time, like how sold do you think the Steelers are currently on Justin Fields being a long-term option?
I walked away from today. I feel like they are pretty sold. I think they're more sold than not, I guess.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm struggling to put a percentage or something on it, but
Yeah.
it really sounded like Justin Fields is at least an option. I mean, I think they're going to end up drafting a guy. They're going to bring in a rookie, so there will be at least someone pressing Justin Fields a little bit. But like, I think this is a guy that I think Wilson is a guy that they will have somewhat of a short leash on. It's not necessarily a guy that they think they can build around long term. I mean, I think there's an option. There's a way to get Fields for relatively cheap relative to what other quarterbacks are making around the league, especially if you keep him kind of on the bench for this year, if things work out the way you plan and Wilson plays well enough, Fields gets to sit on the bench for a while. Fields doesn't have an opportunity to raise his value after they decline. We expect them to not pick up his 5th-year option. So if they don't do that, they bury him on the bench a little bit. They let him learn a little bit. And then he comes out and he doesn't have the kind of resume that some of these top earning quarterbacks in the league have. You have a chance to extend him, say, hey, this is our plan for you. We're not really sold on Wilson. We can bring you in and keep you here. You can enter in pole position to be the starter. And we can roll with that. I think there's some value there. There's a path there. I just the way Mike Tomlin talked about it today, like I think the comment about not looking past this year, I think that has more to do with Wilson than it does with Fields, to be quite honest with you. Because I don't think Fields is definitely not an addition that you make if you're not looking past this year.
Yes, agreed. 100% agreed. And I also I found it very interesting that when he was talking about Kenny Pickett, he said that at the same time that the Kenny Pickett trade happened, they were felt good about where they were with the Chicago trade, which meant they were already having talks. Those conversations were already happening, which means that they had a plan there for Justin Fields, even if it, followed Russell Wilson. And it did follow. Like they had Russell Wilson under contract and they were still talking to Chicago, which means that they felt real good about where things were going. I feel like they already knew Justin Fields was the long-term answer in Pittsburgh. And I don't know, they have to prove that. That has to become a thing, obviously. But I think that that's who they believe could be. And I don't think that's going to, just like you said, I don't know. It's really tough to sit here and say because you don't know what Russell Wilson's going to do. And it's really tough to say that a 35-year-old quarterback is going to go into a season and look good enough where you're sitting around thinking this is worth throwing away the next guy for, which sometimes that's the case. If you think Russell Wilson's going to win you the next 2-3 Super Bowls, go win the next 2-3 Super Bowls. It's not about 5 years from now. It's about the next guy. But if you think Justin Fields could go win you the next, the 2 and 3 and Russell Wilson could win you 1, then you're going to stick with Justin Fields. I agree with you. I found it really interesting that they were talking about that they wouldn't acknowledge moving forward, but they obviously had a plan for Justin Fields. Like, you're not bringing in Justin Fields for nothing. Even if it's a backup role right now, you're not looking at him and saying, this guy's just going to be here to back up Russell Wilson for a season. But we were working on him and on a deal before we got rid of Kenny Pickett. And before Kenny Pickett, like before we knew Kenny Pickett wanted to leave and that Kenny Pickett was going to leave, we're still working on a deal. I think it shows that they didn't have as much faith in Kenny maybe as a lot of people thought that they did, or maybe that they were telling us that they did. And I think that it means that they have a plan for Russell Wilson. Even if Mike Tomlin's not looking past this season, Omar Khan is, Art
Right.
Rooney is, there are people who see this.
That's the thing. They have to make a decision about the future very soon. They have to decide whether or not to pick up his fifth-year option or not, which probably won't. But that's a decision. That's a choice, Like, if you have full faith in Justin Fields, you're not. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it is impossible to not think about the future in this scenario. You signed Russ to a 1-year deal. Like, they have decisions to make coming up soon. It is impossible to ignore those decisions, even at this point.
Yep, I agree. I think that there's a very strong chance that right now the Pittsburgh Steelers have a plan in place, and it might not be Mike. Mike Tomlin's involved. He is 100. He's as heavily involved as the rest of them, if not more involved than the rest of them. But it doesn't surprise me that he says that he's only focused on this year, because he probably is. But he probably knows, and everybody else probably knows, Justin Fields is a long-term answer, and maybe Russell Wilson changes that. But I think it's just as difficult for Russell Wilson to change the Steelers' future plans of Justin Fields as it is for Justin Fields to change the Steelers' current plans with Russell Wilson. I think those two are about the same. That's where we stand.
Yeah. And I don't think the Steelers lie to us Mike Tomlin lies to us when he says, I'm only thinking about this year.
Yeah.
But we've seen him pivot. We've seen this organization pivot pretty quickly, even just this offseason. So I'm not at all ruling out that, what his plan is right now or what he's thinking about right now is what he's going to be thinking about, in the next hour or tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. Things are going to,
that's a good point,
especially in this situation, things are going to change so quickly and so many dominoes are going to fall with the first snap of OTAs and training camp and then the first game. Like, there are a million different things that are going to change before they have to make final decisions about these things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That is a really good point. What their plan is right now might change. Who knows? And that's why Mike Tomlin's not looking into 2025. But there's a soft plan, and they'll hope that it works out, because if it does, I'm sure that's where they're headed in the direction. Crazy first day. A lot of talk. Love that it was a quarterback. Love that Mike Tomlin was very open with us. Appreciative that he was very open with us here at the NFL owners meetings. With that said, we're heading out here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, go check out our work at allsteelers.com and InsideThePanthers.com. We will be back, or I will be back tomorrow, day 2 from the NFL owners meetings. Mike Tomlin is talking with us this morning. Then Omar Khan is set to talk with us tonight. So we will have plenty to talk about tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow, I guess Tuesday, we're talking to Art Rooney. So we'll have plenty to talk about on Wednesday. Wild week, very important week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Plenty to dive into. Excited to bring it all to you. Go check out that new YouTube channel. It's in the pinned comment below, and enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.